Thank you very much. So everyone, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Kelsey Chapman, who is the Assistant Director of the Purdue University Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer Plus Center. As a cultural competencies trainer and facilitator, Kelsey has trained Purdue students, staff, faculty, and Greater Lafayette community members on intersectional and inclusive allyship to the LGBTQIA plus community. Kelsey is a Lafayette native and a Purdue alumna. She received her BA in history with a minor in communication in 2018. She co-facilitated the Sex History and City Study Abroad program with Lowell Kane and Dr. Yvonne Pitts. This program explored the LGBTQ history and culture from the 18th century to the 21st century in three cities, New York, Paris, and Amsterdam, focusing on historical identity, liberation and regulation, and community and cultural expression. So she's very proficient to lead us this afternoon on this topic. Beyond her professional interests, she enjoys reading, board games, and spending time with her partner and their dog. Kelsey, if you would share with us about what makes Purdue so welcoming, we would be grateful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today, everyone. It's lovely to see you all and meet you. Thanks to Susan for inviting me and staying very persistent on following up with me. I appreciate your patience, and I apologize to you. I've had a busy semester. But I'm excited to be here with you all today. I hope we're going to have a good conversation. I'll go ahead and share my slides, if that's okay. I'm an informal facilitator. I would really love to have a conversation with you all. So please feel free to use the raise hand function or drop in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask questions. I find that often the best learning comes when we're just speaking from personal experiences and trying to have a conversation about these topics instead of just me talking at you all. So please feel free to ask me questions. Like I said, my name is Kelsey. I have been with the center in a professional capacity since 2018, but I did my undergrad at Purdue from 2014 to 18, and I'm a local from Lafayette. A little bit about the LGBTQ Center here at Purdue and the work that we do. And summarize our mission statement in three broad areas of education, advocacy, and support. The educational component of what we do is things like this. We do a lot of presentations for a variety of organizations, nonprofits. I'll go talk to anybody about diversity and inclusion. I've spoken to high school robotics clubs, and I've spoken to department-wide meetings here at Purdue. It doesn't really matter. I will go talk to anybody about how to be an LGBTQ ally. And we have a flagship allyship training called Safe Zone here on Purdue's campus. Over 3,500 people on Purdue's campus have taken Safe Zone since we started it in 2014. We also have a supplemental training called Trans Inclusion Training. It's a 90-minute workshop about support for trans and non-binary people. We have a major and minor program calendar. We do educational workshops and programs in our space. We bring speakers to campus. We engage in cross-campus collaborations with other cultural centers, other departments on campus. We're very active in campus life and supporting all of the LGBTQ students at Purdue, but also anybody at Purdue, because a common misconception of the cultural centers here is that we only serve the demographics that we represent. It's actually not true. We really embrace the land-grant mission of Purdue University, which is that we serve the community. And so we kind of view ourselves as like an extension into the Greater Lafayette statewide community. And we've been making moves to kind of advance our mission over the last few years. We participated in Indy Pride for the first time this past summer, and we're looking to be some marshals of the parade next summer. So we're kind of stepping up our community engagement because that really kind of speaks to the support we want to provide our community. Advocacy, lots of things happened when the center first opened in 2012. So the LGBTQ Center is was the fourth of the 5 cultural centers to be established in 2012. The only one after us was the Asian American and Asian Resource and Cultural Center, which was opened in 2015. So we've done a lot in the short amount of time we've been on campus. Our average visitation went from 50 visits a month in the first few years to 150 visits a day. We tracked just over 17,000 visits to our LGBTQ Center last year, and we anticipate having over 21,000 visits this academic year. The advocacy things that we did when the center first opened were things like policy changes, right? Ensuring that Purdue has equitable structural procedures in place and processes so that LGBTQ people can feel supported. We expanded the number of gender inclusive facilities on campus, including the number of gender inclusive restrooms. There were like 20 when the center opened in 2012, and now there's almost 250 on campus. We also expanded and started gender inclusive housing. This is housing where students can apply to live in gender inclusive housing regardless of how they identify, as long as they have a respect of and an understanding of gender diversity. Finally, the support that we provide anybody who comes into our space, but the majority of the population we work with is undergraduate students. We help them do a lot of resource navigation. So existing at a space like Purdue, in a state like Indiana, in a country like the United States, can be challenging for LGBTQ people. And so we do a lot of resource navigation, psychosocial support, community building programs to get folks into our space, to feel comfortable here, to come hang out. And then once they're here, seeing what they really need. Do they need community support? Are they looking to get access to life-saving medical help, medical services? Are they looking to access professional development opportunities, academic opportunities? It really runs the gamut for our students, and each person is different. So we're trying to meet the needs of each and every person that comes in. And that looks like providing lots of community-based resources in our physical space. So we are one of the only places on campus that provides free and confidentially sourced safer sex materials on campus. Anywhere else on campus, you have to purchase said materials, except the 5 cultural centers have free materials. We also have a pop-up location of the ACE Campus Food Pantry. Food security is a really big issue that we try to address here at the center. The majority of our students have expressed food insecurity needs. And so we have like supplemental breakfast items, snacks. The pop-up location of the food pantry is here. Each of the 5 cultural centers has a food pantry pop-up location. And then we have a really close working relationship with the folks that operate the food pantry on campus. What else? A lot. We do a lot. We try to do a lot. We have a full-time staff of 5. And that's also, we've grown very quickly. Our founding director, Lowell Kane, opened the center in 2012. He's still our director today. He was the only staff person for the first few years, and now we have a full-time of 5. So really rapid expansion and growth. We've also moved the physical location of the center 3 times. So we opened in a 1-room building that actually no longer exists on campus. It was torn down. The building was already condemned when they put us in there. And then we were there for a year and got to leave when they were done. So then we were in an office suite, essentially. It was a glorified office suite. It was renovated to be a community space for 8 years. And that was the center that I knew as an undergraduate student here. And then we just moved into this space in Hicks Undergraduate Library in December of last year. So it tripled the size of the center, the square footage. We got to intentionally plan this space. We're really excited about our new center, and we hope that this is going to be a long-term home for us where we can really expand the number of services, expand the number of people that are able to access the space. Because by the end of our time in Schliemann Hall, every seat was taken by 10 a.m. People would have to be turned away because they couldn't sit. People would sit on the floor. It was wild. It was like sardines in a tin can. I frequently would vacate my office for folks to take private calls or something because they had no privacy in the age of COVID. If they had to take a telehealth call, there was nowhere to go. So we would just get them from our offices. Thankfully, now we have reservable phone booth rooms here in the center, but that came as a result of community need, as we knew to make that happen in the new space. So just trying to meet the needs of anybody who walks through our doors is the work that we do, and the work that y'all do too. So there's some commonality here, which is great. This was our semester. It's over now, thankfully. It's a very long semester, y'all. But it was great. We had great turnout at all of our programs. These are some of our major programs. Rainbow Callout is an annual welcome back resource and tabling fair that happens in September of each year. It is a resource fair plus drag show. So we make it fun with the drag, but then we get them in with the drag and then get them help while they're here. We had, I'm blanking on the number, but a lot of people come to Rainbow Callout. It's grown every year. We have over 100 on and off campus community partners that come and table and talk about the services they provide or the community that they want to to build, right? And they want to have an affirming space. We co-sponsor Civic Theater Greater Lafayette, their 9 to 5 musical. We do some photojournalism exhibits. We take trips to local LGBTQ archives. We're always doing something. If you'd like to learn more or stay involved or in touch with us, if you scan that QR code, that'll take you to our website where you can sign up for our newsletter. We send out our newsletter weekly on Mondays or Tuesdays, and that will keep you up to date with what we have coming up in terms of like our activities or trainings or anything. Oh, I forgot that I included pictures. Sorry. Here's the new center. So we moved in here December of last year, tripled the size. We finally got a kitchenette. Something that really was hard about the old space was that we didn't have a kitchen for all of the food we were trying to provide. So we just put it all in the student lounge. I really should include photos of what it used to look like because it was wild. They would like make their food on top of the coffee maker because there was no other storage or counter space. So now we have a kitchenette, which we're really excited about. Food is a big deal here at the center. It's like a central thing. Folks, if they can get in to the center, it's to eat. They get a bite and then they go back to class. There are whiteboard tables for folks to do homework on. It's obviously a really colorful space. It was the first intentionally designed space. Like I mentioned, we got to have a say in what it looks like. We got to have a say in how it was set up. And we love it. It's absolutely wonderful here. So if you'd like to come get a tour, we do tours all the time. You're welcome here, regardless of how you identify. Another misconception, again, is that it's only for LGBTQ people, but anybody, regardless of identity, can come in. I want to move on from the center and start talking a little bit about y'all now. But hopefully that kind of gave you an understanding of like the work that we're trying to do on campus and why and how. So when it comes to supporting LGBTQ people, there are some things to know, right? We can start with what does LGBTQ stand for, right? So in order to kind of have a foundational language and starting off point with you all, I have this crash course on gender and sexuality for you. This is the crashest of courses. I'm going to run through it in 4 minutes. And some people dedicate their entire lives to studying gender and sexuality. So if you're interested in finding out more, I am a big reader. So I have some book recommendations for you all. If you'd like movies, my wife is a big documentarian. I make her watch the documentaries. So I prefer not to. I'll be like, hey, watch this for me for work. Tell me if it's any good. So however you learn, I'm here to help you engage with this content. So some of the key terms here, identity, right, is an internal view of oneself. So you can't see folks, you can see people, but what you can't see when you look at someone is actually how they identify when it comes to gender and sexuality. Some identities are visible from the offset, right, like race, ability or disability, status. These are visible things, but gender and sexuality for the most part are not. What we actually do when we look at someone is we rely on social cues, like what they're expressing to us, their gender expression, in order to refer to them or engage with them. So for the vast majority of people, when you look at them, you automatically clock them as a man or a woman here in American society. And again, this whole conversation is based on Western ideas of gender, sexuality, the United States, our concepts of how gender shows up in the world. So an internal view of gender is gender identity. So someone's internal view of their gender is how they think of themselves internally. This can be woman or man or other. There are people who don't identify with the label man or woman. And what I like about this gender unicorn graphic, which by the way is established or developed by a trans youth-led educational network, which is why I really like it. I like to center the voices of the people that frankly are being targeted the most right now with some of the conversations that are happening nationally, which we can get into. However, what I like about this gender unicorn graphic is that instead of putting man and woman on opposite ends of a spectrum, there's actually just increasing vectors of that value. So you can place yourself anywhere you want on the woman vector, and it doesn't have anything to do with where you feel on the masculine vector, right? So that I think really helps people understand just the complexity of gender expression, the complexity of gender identity. If I were to use myself as an example and place myself on the gender expression vectors, I put myself at like 60% feminine, 60% masculine, 30% other, And that does not equal 100. And that, I think, is kind of the point, right? There is no one way to be a woman. There is no one way to be a man. There is no one way to be a person. My mom, since I'm from Lafayette, so my parents are local and in town. They're both retired, but they know what I do. And so my mom and I will have conversations a lot of the time. And I often use the analogy with my mom, the conversation we had one time that was, she was having a hard time with trans identities, gender expression versus identity. So we're talking about it. And I was like, Mom, do you know your friend Sharon? How like she never leaves the house without a full face of makeup on. And she looks so cute every single time she goes out of the house, regardless of where she goes, even if she's just running to get gas, right? And she's like, yeah, of course. I'm like, well, you know how we're not like that? And she was like, yes, I do. And I was like, that's gender expression, right? Like everybody has different ways that we show up. My mom and I don't wear makeup. We won't catch us dead in a pair of heels because we break our ankles. We're very like salt of the earth Midwestern women, like, I don't know, just everybody's different. And I think that maybe helps folks frame gender expression versus identity and understanding how when you look at someone, what you see is their, when you look at me, you see the length of my hair, you usually see what I'm wearing, you hear my vocal registry, my mannerisms, how I introduce myself, and you clock me, right? Even before I say she, her, or I'm a woman, you clock me as a woman. That's because I'm cisgender. I identify with the gender that I was assigned at birth. When I was born, the doctor said, congratulations, it's a girl, and handed me to my parents, and they gave me a mostly feminine name. There is Frasier, for those of you who, that's back. Frasier's back. You're a big Frasier fan. I was so surprised to see it. Sorry. Anyway, so, I was given a feminine name. I was socialized as a girl, right? I grew up playing girl sports, lining up with the girls in school, and I identify as a woman today. That is not true for everybody, right? The gender that we're assigned at birth that follows us around for the rest of our lives is not equal for everyone. Folks don't always identify with how they're assigned at birth. That's because gender as a construct, as an idea, we've put it on the same plane as biological sex. We conflate biological sex characteristics with gender. And while for the vast majority of people that's true, it's not true for everybody. So how can we be allies? How can we be good people to the folks who that's not true for, right? And that's what we're talking about today. So another important component of biological sex that I think a lot of people don't know about is biological sex isn't binary either. Biologists? Yeah, I have a social sciences degree. I'm so sorry. Biologists talk a lot, and endocrinologists talk a lot about intersex populations, right? These folks who have anatomical biological sex markers that are not clearly defined masculine or feminine or like female or male. The number of people living in the United States with this condition is approximately the same number of people who are natural born redheaded. I always take a pause because that's a lot of people. I mean, when I think back to my third grade class, there were at least a couple genders in there, So that means that there are lots of people that have either not fully expressed sex hormones or sex hormones. Maybe they have atypical or missing internal or external genitalia. Maybe they have androgen insensitivities. If you're interested in learning more about intersex folks, I actually just read this really awesome book. This is the name of the book. I kind of apologize. I don't know. It's called Inverse Cowgirl by Alicia Roth Weigel. She's a intersex activist. She was born with an androgen insensitivity syndrome. And so she was born with testes that were removed without her consent as a young baby. This happens a lot to intersex people. They're medically performed on without their consent when they're young children, because the idea is that, well, we got to help them get in one of these boxes right away, right? And so she said that it's a great book. Read the book. The final two components on the gender unicorn are physical and emotional attraction. Just know that for most people, physical and emotional attraction are linked, right? They're the same. Like if you are attracted physically to someone, you are also attracted emotionally to someone. Just know that that's not true for everyone. Some people identify as asexual or aromantic, meaning that they don't experience physical or emotional attraction to some or all types of people. Crash course. Final two terms on that previous slide are kind of the society that I've been mentioning, right? This concept of we expect these things from people. And this concept, this idea is heteronormativity and cisnormativity. The prefix cis, CIS, meaning same. So same gender, cisgender people identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. So if you were born a girl and you identify as a woman, you are cisgender. If you are not that, you are probably in the transgender umbrella. Language and terminology really trips people up. I think the more important thing is to understand the concepts themselves and not so much getting bogged down in like what's the difference between pansexual and bisexual and agender and gender fluid and gender queer. I'll talk more about that in a little bit to not get so overwhelmed with all the words, because I get overwhelmed with the words. Sometimes my students use phrases and I'm like, this is my full-time job. And I'm like, can you tell me more about what that means? Because I don't know, right? We're all learning all the time. There are things we can do to make folks know that we are aware, right, of how gender and sexuality shows up in society, and that we're aware that it doesn't fit for everybody. To do that, I think we have to bring this just a little bit wider before we can go zoom back in. I've been talking a lot about gender and a lot about sexuality during this conversation, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that allyship can really be expanded to all different aspects of identity, right? So here on the screen, I only have 7 identities. This is not an exhaustive list. I always have people that are like, but what about this? You forgot this. And I'm like, yes, that's an identity too. Sorry, friends. But these 7 categories are pretty major identities that we all hold an identity within these categories. Some of us have marginalized identities, some of us have privileged identities within these categories. The goal of allyship, or what I hope you walk away with today, is understanding that there are aspects of other people's lives that you may not know a lot about. Where are you not informed? Because I promise you that it is probably somewhere, because I'm learning a lot all the time. I often tell people in my safe zone trainings that allyship is like a lifelong thing. It's a journey, not a destination, right? And instead of, I hope that inspires you and encourages you instead of discourages you. There's a misconception with allies that you have to be perfect, and that if you don't know everything, you can't say something. The opposite is true, friends. We're all out here making it up, figuring it out. It's better to say something, right? And to continue to learn and try rather than let fear of being wrong keep you from engaging. To use myself as an example for this, like the concept of intersecting identities, I identify as a non-disabled person. I don't hold any physical or mental disabilities. And so I don't know a lot about disabled people, or I didn't until I watched a documentary a few weeks ago. Actually, it was months ago now. It's called Crip Camp, and it was about the disability rights movement of the 20th century that led to the establishment of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Learned so much about these awesome, brave, fearless disabled people that threw their bodies out of their wheelchairs onto the state house floors to demand rights, you know? So it was powerful, and I had no idea. And now I've learned a lot more about those people, and I've learned more about how ability and disability show up in the world. So that's one example of how to kind of do this. The last category that I know might be confusing is institutional knowledge. For y'all, that is your faith organization, right? For me, this is Purdue, the Purdue system I know a lot about. I have a lot of privilege within the Purdue system. I know people, I know things, I know the offices on campus, and I can help folks with my knowledge. The whole thing of allyship is we're supporting the whole person. You know, I do work at the LGBTQ Center, but if someone comes to me and they need accommodations for their disability, I'm not going to say to them, well, I only do gay stuff. You have to go somewhere else for that, right? I'm going to meet that person where they're at. And I'm going to say, you know, I don't know how to get you accommodations, but I do have a friend over in the Disability Resource Center, and I'm going to connect you with them, right? It's that walk. It's the warm handoff that I'm sure y'all do a lot of. Okay, so focusing a little bit more deeply into the LGBTQ community, what are some specific challenges that we see this community experience? Does anybody have any questions while I take a sip of water? Is this all kosher for everybody so far? Awesome, thanks for the thumbs and the nodding. Okay, great. So challenges that the LGBTQ community faces. Microaggressions are concepts. These are little words or behaviors that are intended to make bridges with people, but in fact do the opposite of that. They are like othering experiences for people who are marginalized. if you take our Safe Zone training, I have a lot of different examples of microaggressions against LGBTQ people. Couple that I experience very often is whenever I'm out in public with my wife, we're assumed to be sisters. We're not assumed to be married, because people look at us and I think that they see the closeness, but they don't consider that queerness, like they haven't really considered all the different ways that people can be close. And so they're like, oh, are you sisters? It's like, no, we're actually married, and it happens a lot. And it's just a reminder, right, that your relationship isn't seen as what it is. It's seen as it's put into like a heteronormative relationship instead of what we are, which is two married women, right? Another thing that I get a lot is like, well, who's the man in the relationship? Well, the whole point of this relationship is that there's not one, right? And again, I think that what people are trying to ask is, who does the masculine stuff? Like, who hates to mow the lawn? And the answer is me. I hate mowing, so Emily does it, right? Like, my wife does the mowing, I do the cooking. Like, I know that people are trying to just create connection, but being aware that the way in which you show up and the way you ask people about themselves, for marginalized populations can be kind of a minefield. Or I guess what it does for a person with a marginalized identity, that maybe if you do something like that, it tells them that you might not be as aware as you think you are, right? Because what you just said was actually really offensive and you're carrying on like it wasn't, right? So that's going to change how that person interacts with you. I have another book recommendation. I'm really sorry for all the watchers in here. I have 35 Dumb Things Well-Intended People Say by Dr. Maura Cullen. Dr. Maura Cullen has been a longtime advocate in the DEI field. This is more deep diving into microaggressions, right? Showing up and putting your foot in your mouth. So how to avoid doing that. That's a really short book. You'll read it in 45 minutes, but it really kind of helps you to avoid those types of like political or those social snafus, right? Those interpersonal snafus. Safety. LGBTQ people are not feeling particularly safe right now in the United States, with the introduction of hundreds of bills targeting access to transgender affirming healthcare, or transgender youth participation in sports, or transgender or LGBTQ safety in schools, right? We're seeing a lot of effects come into play of state legislations trying to, what's the word? Oh, I know there are lots of words, but monitor, right? Or have more say or input into transgender people's lives. And they're introducing these bills. I think, there's a lack of education and information about LGBTQ people. And so the access to this life-saving healthcare that lots of the American Society of Pediatrics says that access to transgender affirming healthcare is life-saving for transgender youth. And there's actually a crisis of trans youth suicide in the United States. So, we see the benefits of these things that are being targeted by the bills. And so there's a disconnect, I think, between what it actually constitutes support and safety for young people and what does harm. So there's some confusion that we're having as a country right now, right? We're all seeing this, or if you haven't, just so you know, for the past 3 years, there have been more and more LGBTQ targeting bills, right? Across state legislatures across the country, and several states have passed these bills into law. How this is showing up in our students' lives here at the center. I've had more than one student tell me from some of the states that have passed these bills that they're seeking asylum. Essentially, they're fleeing. They're moving out of these states with their families. We have a student here that said, yeah, my mom and I sold our house in Texas, and we're trying to find a place to live here. So, helping them navigate that. I have a student who is from Florida, and she's brilliant, and she's a junior, and she's got about another year to figure out where she's going, because Florida was one of the states that has passed laws that say it's illegal to discriminate against her on the basis of her gender identity. So she can't go back to Florida where her family is So she's, figuring out life. That's some big stuff to figure out as an undergraduate student. So safety is a really big concern. Familial support, we see as a result of all of this confusion, this misinformation, and really just heightened rhetoric, right, around LGBTQ people, we see lack of familial support. So something that we do a lot around the center is have conversations about safety planning for students that are planning to come out to their families. Coming out is in the process of telling your friends, your communities, your loved ones that you are queer is a fraught often because people, if they're not out to family or if they haven't received positive messages, will often struggle to know how to come out and stay safe, right? Sometimes access to money can be taken away, access to car or transportation. Sometimes if a student goes home for the holidays are a hard time here at the center. If they go home for the holidays and come out over the holidays, we've had to help students get back to campus before because family will disown them over winter break. And then they got to get back to campus and figure out how to keep living their life. So that's a really big concern as students navigate, young adults navigate their life and coming out to friends and family. Legal issues. So each state is different because there are and the reason why we're seeing all of these bills, I think over 400 bills specifically addressing the LGBTQ community in state legislations across the country. The reason why we're seeing all this is because there are no federal level protections, right? So because LGBTQ identities are not included at the federal level of protected classes like ethnicity, immigration, right, disability, because gender and sexuality aren't included, it's left up to the states, and each state does it differently. And each state has a myriad of hoops to jump through and legalese to read and money to pay to update ID documents if they prefer to change their name or their gender marker. In about half the states in the country, there are no explicit protections on the books for LGBTQ people, meaning that you can be fired or not hired, you can be denied housing. It's a fraught time, which leads to higher rates of stress, stigma, and suicidality in the LGBTQ community. So if you have access to mental health first aid training or, any kind of suicide prevention training, I highly recommend that to all people who work with youth. We have at Purdue QPR. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer training. It's suicide prevention training. I don't know if it's open to the public, but if it is, I do recommend signing up to take that. Or Mental Health America will offer mental health first aid trainings often. So those are great. Speaking just a little bit more about the legislation that we're seeing in states across the country right now, I really like the Movement Advancement Project. This is a nonprofit that tracks these bills and explains why they're considered negative or low or high overall. And it goes into that down below. You can click on the state and see which bills they're talking about, how it impacts. And if you click on this, the overall policy tally, did I link this? No, of course I didn't. If you do go to this though, the sexual orientation tab is green with orange and some red. And then you go to the gender identity tab and it's red. We're really, as a country, as a nation, we are hyper focused on transgender people right now. And it's showing up in state legislations. So what can you do? That's maybe not the best transition. What can you do, right? What can you do showing up in your daily life, right, to make it known that you are an ally if you are one? If you don't feel that you are, what can you do? What do you want to do? Do you want to continue to educate yourself? Some really tangible things that I think help show people that you are a safe space or that you are an ally is understanding how when people show up in a room, there's lots of assumptions that happen, right? Back to that gender expression versus gender identity thing. When someone shows up in a room and you clock them immediately as a man or a woman, you're going to then assign them pronouns. In English, pronouns are gendered. And so pronouns are just words we use to refer to someone when we're not using their name. That's all they are. They've been there. It's a hot button issue right now. People, there's a lot of, again, misinformation about what pronouns are, but really they're just words that if we're not using someone's name, we're using a pronoun. In English, they're gendered. In other parts of the world, they're not. But particularly here in the United States, particularly in higher education settings, is where we're seeing lots of introductions with names and pronouns. And it's starting to leak out. Like, we're starting to see more like corporations and folks adopt these tools. But essentially, introducing yourself with your pronouns or including your pronouns anywhere you put your name helps to kind of push back on these assumptions that we make. And how it does that is by normalizing the behavior, by cisgender people sharing their name and pronouns, we can help make space for folks that might not feel comfortable speaking up first, right? So as allies, we really need to lead the way, normalizing things that make people feel more comfortable in a space. So, and this often helps to just, it often aids the non-marginalized people in the space too. I had a person who took my Safe Zone training a few years ago say that she put her pronouns in her email signature and she stopped getting misgendered. She has a very gender neutral name. It was like Alex Smith, and she had a doctorate. And so she would get misgendered in emails back to her all the time because people assumed that she was a man because it said Dr. Smith. Because, you know, societally, we always do that thing. So it wasn't until she put her pronouns in her email signature that that stopped happening. And so she wanted to share that as like, hey, this helped me out and I'm not even transgender. So there's a really good reason. I have a friend named Tony, spelled with an I, but if you wouldn't know that, you would say, hey, Tony, and then use he, him pronouns. So, right, like there are lots of reasons why this is a good idea and why this helps to normalize things. So putting your pronouns next to your name on a business card, on your Zoom name display, on anytime you introduce yourself, right? You're just creating opportunities for people to show up as their authentic selves, which hopefully helps them engage better and feel more present with what you're trying to say to them. So yeah, here is an example of all the different types of places. I want to say that contextually, I don't go through my life saying, hi, my name is Kelsey, my pronouns are she, her, every single time I introduce myself. It's contextual. So I don't tell the Starbucks barista my pronouns when she asks for my name. I don't, you know, if I'm never going to talk to this person again, I don't. It's more like if I'm leading a facilitated discussion, or if I'm publicly speaking, or if I'm going to be working with these folks for a long time, like a new work collaboration, then I will. But again, if it's not an appropriate thing, then you don't have to force it, right? But trying to work that in there. And again, this is going to feel awkward. I hope that again doesn't discourage you. It encourages you. It's hard to rewire our brains to do new social cues, right? So I have very vivid memories of like a professional academy in elementary grade, like grade school, teaching me how to handshake. I don't know if anybody else did, but I was taught in like 3rd grade how to give a good handshake. And it's like, you want to web to web and eye contact. And, you know, there's all these, we teach people how to socialize, and we can relearn how to socialize in new ways. It just takes time. So if you feel really silly doing this, just know that I also felt really silly doing it. Took me a few weeks of being intentional behind the practice for it to feel more normalized. And really, allyship is about the commitment to making it feel more normalized, right? So best of luck with your pronoun practice. And if you want to practice, I encourage you to come to Safe Zone training. Or I had people say that they practice using they, them pronouns on their dog at home because they were worried about messing up out in the real world. You know, there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate this, but it really has an outsized impact if you are aware that people might show up differently than what you think they do. Great. These final tips are kind of like my big takeaways from this book, The Savvy Ally, A Guide for Becoming a Skilled LGBTQ Advocate. This is the book that informs our curriculum for our Safe Zone training. I really love this book by Janine Gainsbourg. She is a cisgender straight woman who got into LGBTQ advocacy later in life. Like, she was like in her 50s, and she got in touch with the local LGBT community center and found a passion for it. And so now she like talks about LGBTQ advocacy. It's very approachable. And she puts it into like terms and considerations that are just like real life talking, right? Which I really appreciate. All this academic jargon around here sometimes can drive me nuts. So best practices for being an ally. Try to ungender your language. So instead of hey guys, hey girls, hey everybody, hey friends, and it can be what feels right to you. I've really embraced y'all. I have family from Texas, so I heard it growing up whenever we visited them, and it feels normal for me to say it. Other folks are like, I just can't get behind y'all. I say, hey friends, hey buddies, hey everybody, especially if you're talking to youth, like, hey kiddos, so ungendering language, trying to move away from you are a boy and you are a girl, as much as possible, or at least introducing the possibility that there's else, right? There is in fact another way to be. Visibly indicate support. I once had a student tell me that they could smell a rainbow from a mile away. So if you have a rainbow flag, put it up, put it somewhere. If you have a transgender pride flag, if you have a little pin, pronoun pins, rainbow pins, anywhere, anytime. My dad and I attend women's basketball games here at Purdue, and he always wears the little rainbow Purdue pin that I gave him years ago. It's just right, like anytime you have an opportunity to throw a rainbow on, it really does mean a lot to the people that need to see it, right? And the people that need to see it will see it. The people who don't need to see it might see it, and who cares, right? Mirror terms. This is the biggest advice I can give you with the terms, okay? With all the words. Use words that people use for themselves, for them. We always want to mirror and validate how someone's identifying themselves to us. It's okay to ask follow-up questions if contextually you have a relationship with the person and you don't know what word they just said. If it's contextually appropriate, if you feel like you have that rapport, you can say, can you tell me about what that means? I'm kind of new to learning about gender. I don't know. You can make it work for you, right? Ask people how they'd like to be referred to. My far and away, my biggest advice whenever someone asks me like a kind of a situational question in my trainings, ask the person how they'd like to be treated. Whether that's, hey, can I introduce you to Kelsey, who I met over in November from the LGBTQ Center? Like, I think you should meet up and talk to her. Can I introduce you via email and link you? Or, sometimes people want to know how they can support friends, or they overheard this thing and it didn't sit right with them, and what do they do? I don't know. Y'all probably have examples, and frankly, I'd love to hear them, but far and away the best thing to do is ask the person whose identity it is, what they'd like, right? How they want to be supported. And finally, developing skills to react to microaggressions, increase your comfort and your familiarity with difficult conversations. It's really a great idea to have a couple of responses ready for when you do hear or see language or behavior that doesn't sit right with you, or doesn't seem as welcoming or affirming of an environment that you want to create. Say something, say anything. It's better to say something than nothing. And you can just say like, "Ooh, hey, that didn't sit right with me. Can you explain what you were trying to say there? Or can you go a little bit further about what you were doing?" Or, "Oh, that really didn't sit right with me. I don't think that we should use that word as a punchline at all," if it's like a gay joke or something. But really, truly sharing how things sit with you or how you react to things can humanize. So often jokes made at other people's expense, especially identity jokes, are dehumanizing. And so rehumanizing them by attaching how you feel about what was said is a great way to be an ally. This is just not really applicable to y'all, but I wanted to include it just to show you kind of the systemic policies, right, that Purdue has in place to create this equitable environment for Purdue people. Our non-discrimination policy here at Purdue protects on the basis of gender and identity, gender and sexuality. So it expands on the usual federally protected classes. It includes gender identity, gender expression, and sexuality very explicitly. Purdue's non-discrimination policy does. So that means trans people have all these rights at Purdue, regardless of if they've changed anything on their ID documents. Doesn't matter what their legal name is. Their real name, by the way, the real name of a transgender person is the name they're telling you that they want to go by. That's their real name. Sometimes you'll need to know someone's legal name, like for process paperwork reasons, right? But for the most part, someone's name is what they want to be called. But here at Purdue, they have these rights regardless of what their gender marker is on their birth certificate, on their ID documents, what their name is. They can go by the name they want to go by here at Purdue. It's not always a simple process to get the systems updated because systems don't talk to each other, but that's part of the resource navigating that we can provide for them. I'm going to stop there because I think we've got some time for questions and conversation that I'd really love to have with y'all. So again, the next recommended, if you want, like, tell me something right now to do, go read the Savvy Ally. I think that's a great place to start, and then you can kind of identify what's next. And then finally, that link tree just goes to our social media and our newsletter. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to y'all for your questions.
I have a question. You mentioned federal policy, and I thought it's all kind of blurry. I thought maybe last year there was a change at the federal level, which seemed like a good thing for LGBTQ folks. Does that, maybe you, I'm sure you know more about it than I do. Could you say a little bit more about where we stand federally?
Yeah. Okay. So that did happen. That good thing. Here's what happened. There was a good thing that happened with the Supreme Court decision about employment and housing discriminations. However, LGBTQ people are not breathing easy because we've seen these, we've seen things be repealed, right? Or it's kind of like, because there is not this federal legislation, which has been introduced, it's called the Equality Act. It gets introduced to the US House every session, and it never makes it out of, and it just keeps getting stalled. But the Equality Act would enact those federal level protections. Because those don't exist, and because it was just a Supreme Court decision, folks are still not feeling like the work is done, and that, like, let me say this, LGBTQ advocates are not considering that Supreme Court decision to be effective policy for ensuring non-discrimination. Good question, though. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelsey, for sharing with us some best practices. It's really great to hear. There was a friend of mine in my seminary work who was a big fan of the term siblings in church language. And the first time I heard it, just in the same way that you were saying, like it was like, oh, that's weird. But the more I heard it, the more it's like, oh, this is actually really neat in a way that sisters and brothers really doesn't quite get at. And you know, I want to offer that as something that did not ring right to me, but the more that it's been used, as someone who lived in Texas for a while, I've adopted the y'all as well.
Yeah, y'all's so good.
It's really quite good. And siblings and friends, thank you for those options. And I wanted to include siblings as, you know, other church language for us.
Oh, wait till you start using all y'all. I've recently started all y'all. Oh, that's a good one.
That train sailed.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good. That's great. Yeah, no, thank you. I think a lot about language, actually, and it can be a little, sometimes people are like, what are we saying now? What is not right to say now? And I get that, right? There can be some frustration when it seems like things are changing all the time, and it's because they are. It's because of the internet, and it's because of the world and the way it is now. Instead of letting it freak me out or discourage me, though, I try to shift, not just focusing on like specific words that I don't say anymore, but like understanding the why behind it, right? That has helped me. So like, lately I've been, just since we're talking about language, lately I've been thinking about like violence in language. Someone pointed out to me like, hey, shoot that to me straight, or oh, we're gonna kill that. You know, like when you start thinking about like, oh yeah, like we are using words that mean some things to mean not the same thing. So it's just kind of an exercise in reflection. Yeah, I love that. More thoughts or questions?
Yeah, Kelsey, first of all, thank you so much. This has been delightful. Absolutely wonderful. I could probably ask a lot of questions, but I'll stick to one. Does the center curate a list of houses of worship in the area that would be LGBTQ friendly? And if so, how does one get on that list?
So that's a great question, Kevin. We do. The list exists in our heads. So often with community resourcing, right? It is community, hey, asking around through the grapevine stuff. And since the center is 11 years old, I have big hopes and dreams for getting some sort of directory. Pride Lafayette attempted one, but it requires so much upkeep, right? Because things change, people move, right? Like some safe spaces become unsafe, some safe spaces close, some they move, you know. That Pride Lafayette has a Northwest Indiana directory, but it's outdated now. We would love to have like a fully fleshed out thing. Right now it just looks like building community and relationships and meeting you, frankly. I'd love to get coffee with any one of you. I'd love to come back and talk. You know, let's keep, because I mean, you're on the call. You want to do this work. So
Well,
want to help support people.
I might suggest too that Pride would have a list of the houses of worship that have participated in Outfest annually, and there are 3
Yeah.
of those congregations represented on this call today.
Fantastic.
And we all know others that are there as we rub elbows with them.
And Susan, I will reach out to you over maybe winter break or,
Wonderful.
you know, before next Rainbow Call Out, to really get y'all plugged back in, because I think COVID and, you know, everything has been othering and confusing, and yeah, let's get you all to Rainbow Call Out. It is, I mean, thousands of students come. It's huge, and we're kind of running out of venues on campus to host it because it's gotten so big now that it's just like, again, sardines. But yeah, definitely we always have faith organizations there. I want to say some, but I'm blanking hard. Wesley's always there. Chapel of the Good Shepherd is there.
Enough.
First United Methodist out on whatever. You all know these things. Yeah.
And if I could, just for my colleagues, a moment, we recently made new name tags at Bethany, and pronouns were the norm on the new name tags. My colleagues will appreciate this. The Presbyterian Church strives to be a big tent under which all are able to be under. And so even here at Bethany, we had like 3 or 4 folks say, hey, what's this pronoun thing about? I don't like that. I don't want them on my name tag.
Right.
And I said, sure, no problem. We'll take that off of your name tag, which at first I was like, I don't like that. But as I thought about it more, this really they're doing a favor to folks by removing that from their name tag that then identifies them as somebody who may not be a safe person when pronouns are an issue.
And I want to say just real quick after that, Kevin, that that's okay. And I know you weren't implying that it's not, but again,
right.
I care about this as an educator, meeting people where they're at, you know? So if someone's like, I don't pronouns, what? No, okay, fine, great. You know, totally fine. It's not something we're going to force down people's throats. It's something that if you want to be mindful and intentional about how you're showing up, and if you're curious and want to lean into this, here it is. If not, don't worry about it. And yeah, you're totally right. And we don't, I think you all know this, like we're so polarized right now because I think we're not used to like disagreeing and just agreeing to disagree. Like there's like you have to accept and affirm all of my lived reality or you are an awful person. And so getting back to, hey, it's okay to disagree and like to be uncomfortable around each other as long as we're not being awful to each other, right? Like, you get this. Yeah, thank you. What other thoughts or questions do you have or anything?
What does it mean to you to be deeply welcoming?
That's a good question. Deeply welcoming. I think it's about meeting people where they're at. So I think that the work I do as an LGBTQ educator is an important part of what I do, but it's not my entire identity. I've been thinking a lot about my Midwestern identity lately. So being from the place that I'm now living and will be for the rest of my life, knowing how you show up in spaces, right? Really interrogating what you think and feel about others and why. And then being present with people when you're with them, meeting them where they are at, checking in. I always try to check in if it's people I care about, right, with loved ones, like how they're doing. I don't know if there's a right answer to that question, Susan.
That's a great answer.
What do you think? I mean, how do you do it?
Anybody else want to? I don't want to take this. I think what you said is great, and I don't think I think as deeply about it as what you just said. To
Oh,
really
sorry.
meet people where they're at, to check in with people, to be present and mindful. I think that's all wonderful
Yeah.
and great. And you'd said it before as well. So thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share how they understand that? No, I think you gave a great answer.
Thanks. Thank you. I don't know why I second guessed myself. I guess you're right. Any other like pressing or final questions? Okay.
I don't see any. Thank you so much in both your knowledge and your wisdom that you gave us, even when you weren't telling us all the things that could help us in terms of directly, as you had in your PowerPoint. Even the comments you made about being flexible, meeting people where they're at. You said so much that's going to be helpful to us.
Oh,
Thank
good,
you
good.
very,
I mean,
very much.
Of course, I love, I mean, the work that y'all are trying to do is, or doing, sorry, doing is like the most important work, right? So thank you all for what you do.
Well,
What a
thank
feel good way
you.
to end that. Thanks, everybody. It was great to meet you all. Best of luck. Have a good rest of your day.
One more thing before you all
Oh,
go. Thank you all as well for being here and being part of this conversation and hearing what Kelsey had to say, and her and being interested in this topic. I want to share with you that this has all been recorded. As you know, it will be on the Presbyteria YouTube channel here in a couple months or a couple weeks. Please check it out. Please refer it to others. Kelsey, what you gave us is such great information. It's going to be a helpful resources to people who weren't even here today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, did you need, oh, let's stop the